Something seems to be happening. So I'm back to tell you about it. Okay. I have been curious about Phalaenopsis spikes. Should you cut them? Should you not cut them? Why? And I have gone to not cutting the spikes because, well, that kind of ends that story. The blooms are done, you cut the spike, story over. But something interesting has happened this time. As you can see, this plant used to have two spikes. The blooms of one are gone, and it has died back. I'm going to let it get a little crispier before I cut it, because one of my reasons for not cutting spikes is, you cut into live tissue. Cutting a dead spike I've got no problem with, but cutting into live tissue is an option for nasty things to get into your plant. So I let them crisp up a bit even after they're dead, so that there's not a door created for things to get in. So this one's not quite there. It's definitely yellow, more brown than yellow, but it still seems to have the faintest signs of life. So we're going to wait until the spirit of the spike is left, essentially, before cutting it. But you can see the other one still has blooms. They're facing the wrong way, but this isn't about the pretty blooms. You want pretty blooms? Go to some other orchid channel. You'll find pretty blooms in most any orchid channel, but not this one, not today. The point is, the spike is alive, the blooms are alive. The first one died and it decided to promptly eat its spike. Sometimes they do that. I've got a fowl over here. I bought the mother plant. It died just before dying. It gave me two keikis. This is the one that is left. Yeah, it looks like it's about ready to die, I know. But it does the same as that one did. It blooms, well, it produces a spike first, and then it, buds, and then the blooms. The blooms die, and I'll say immediately. Plants do things slowly, so nothing's immediate. But in the timeline of a plant, thinking in those timelines, I'll say it immediately starts to eat its spikes when it's done with its flowers. This is all it's ever done. Got big enough to produce a spike, did, bloomed, ate the spike. Every year for, I don't know, about somewhere around 7 years, it's done that. It's just what it does. And this one, nearly as old, not quite, not in my care, gets the same treatment. You can see they're about 2 feet apart. It holds its spikes. Like I say, they're 2 feet apart, maybe a little more, a little less, give or take. It holds its spikes, or at least part of them. They die back so far and then it stops and it just holds it for however long. Same care. They get the same water. They're in the same environment, so only the slightest change in environment Right now, the humidity gauge says 80% humidity. Same care. They do slightly different things with their spikes. This one appears that it's going to eat its spikes like the old purple one that doesn't quite know if it wants to live yet. But we'll see what the other spike does when those blooms die. I've been on this experiment long enough to know that it could do something completely different with that spike. Or it could do the same thing. It's this one here beside it that taught me you just don't know. This curly spike actually had 3 sets of blooms. It did the first blooming, they died, and I've said before, the second bloom was even better than the first. That's not normal. You know, there's a myth that says the second blooming will never be as good as the first. Not never. Not never ever. Because the spike did it. And I documented it. So it's not a never ever thing. It might be a rare thing. But it's not a never ever. This plant likes to prove that there are myths in the orchid world. Second blooming on a spike's not going to be as good as the first. It says, no, I can do it. It's done it once. It's said that orchids won't grow a leaf while they're growing a spike. It's done that more than once. Did it with its last spike. And on top of growing a leaf with the flowering spike, it extended its roots too. Is this a plant that is being odd? Or is this a plant that is so happy that it can do those things? Yet it has the same care as the one that won't do those things. So there's that too. You know, spikes that aren't as old as that one have bloomed and died and been removed. That one's still holding on. My translation, I always say, learn to speak plant. Well, I'm not completely fluent in plant. I can't have a conversation with this thing. But from what I gather, it's telling me that plants can decide to do one thing one year, something totally different the next. It's kind of like the plant can make a decision. I don't know that it's decision making like we make decisions. We're human. This is a plant. Yeah. 2 completely different life forms. I mean, a chicken is closer to a human than a plant. Dog is closer to a human than a plant. But they do different things. I mean, this one is unpredictable. The purple one that's trying to die at the moment, it tends to be very predictable. grows a spike, does a flush of blooms. Those blooms die. Then the spike dies. I can't say that's what this one's going to do with its next spike. I've had this plant for years and I don't even know what it's going to do with the next spike. Might be something completely new. But is it being weird? Or is it just showing me things that are possible? Rare? Maybe. But possible. Okay. I think that's about all I've got. What am I going to name this one? I've got to figure that out. I'm thinking a good title for this video might be that logic and theory do not necessarily equal fact. I'm liking that. I've been thinking about that as a title all day, and I think that might be the title. Logic and theory do not necessarily being the important word, equal fact. Okay. Talk to you next time.